Thank you so much for coming today to Michigan State University Extension's Lunch and Learn series. I am Monica Smith. I am your Extension educator in Kent, Allegan, and Ottawa counties in the area of foods and nutrition. And today, in one short hour, I am going to run you through 112 pages of the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. And when you leave here today, you'll at least know where to find what you're looking for and have an idea of what is new. This is a lot. I apologize for the speed at which I will travel, but this will be posted on our website, www.kentnutrition, all one word, .weebly, weebly.com. So you'll be able to find everything in its entirety on the website. Just a little FYI, we've been doing this for a while. Dietary guidelines, we started in 1980, here we are at 2010, and they get updated every 5 years. There's nothing random about this. There's a clear reason why it's done. Now look, for ages 2 and older, purpose is for providing science-based advice for 2 and older, including those at risk for chronic disease, okay? They want policymakers, nutrition educators, health professionals, they want all of us on the same page. That's why they do this. We want everybody to be saying the same thing. USDA is the primary entity behind this, and Health and Human Services, and it's done, like I said, every 5 years. Now, there's nothing random. There's a whole methodology behind this, and when you look at this, you can see why it takes 5 years to update it. You can't turn this around in 6 months. What's going on? Now, here is the new document, Dietary Guidelines for Americans 2010. This has not even come out yet in published form. They're promising it to the consumers on April 27th, where you could actually order a hard copy of it, but you can download it at this point in time from www.dietaryguidelines.gov. You can download the entire document. It is organized very well. As you can see, it goes straight through, and you can easily go to any chapter that you want to go to for what you're wanting to focus on. There's some new stuff, some really, really good stuff this time. This gives a quick executive summary. Never before have we talked about people at risk for chronic disease, okay? We're doing that now because guess what? Do you think it's only a small portion of people in the U.S. that are at risk for chronic disease? No, absolutely not. It's a lot of people. And if you exclude them when you're talking about the dietary guidelines, you've just excluded a huge swath of the population. This also is focusing on 2 overarching concepts this time, because they realize if we hit these 2, we'll have done a whole lot. So if we maintain our calorie balance and try to sustain a healthy weight and look at consuming nutrient-dense foods and nutrient-dense beverages, we'll be a healthier community. In other words, they're saying 100 calories is not 100 calories. If I eat 1,800 calories today, but I ate that 1,800 calories in soda and pop, a healthy person I will not be. It's about nutrient density. In Chapter 1, you get this information. The dietary guidelines is explained, the uses, why it's important, and then it sort of gives you a roadmap to the rest of the document. This is where they talk about nutrient dense. They're talking about when you're eating nutrient dense foods, you're eating things that are high in vitamins, high in minerals, high in fiber, low in solid fats, added sugars. They're saying it now, refined starches. They're telling you a grain is not a grain. A piece of white bread is not equal to a piece of whole grain bread. They're coming right out and saying it. And you know, they sort of said it the last time they did the pyramid, right? Remember how at the bottom of the pyramid you had your whole grains, and then as it worked to the top you would see a piece of white bread much closer to the top? They gave you that graphic. Now they're really coming out and saying it to help you with that. They're saying it's better to eat a food where the nutrient is retained rather than one that the nutrient is taken out, refined, and added back in, like enriched flour. They take everything from it and then re-enrich it to make it somewhat worthwhile, right? They're saying now, guess what? it was better like it was to begin with. There's value to that. They're saying also that these vegetables, fruits, whole grain seafood, all of these things are valuable. They're all nutrient dense until you start adding salt, fat, sugar. At that point, that's how a green bean goes from a green bean, which is almost perfect unto itself, correct? And then it makes its way to the Thanksgiving table where it becomes green bean casserole. And now it's got a lot of stuff added to it that takes away from its nutrient density. Now we've got a calorie-dense product, right? Tasty, great for Thanksgiving, but perhaps not a basis for everyday eating. In chapter 2, they're talking about balancing calories to manage weight. Never before have they come right out and said in the dietary guidelines, it is time to manage our weight. All right, they're finally doing that. And guess what they're telling us now? It's all segments of our society. It's not one ethnic group, one cultural group. It's not men or women. It's not people with higher income or lower income. Guess what? Everybody. It's everywhere you go, right? And it's such a problem. We need to look at this as a societal issue. Finally, they're saying that. Isn't that great? It's okay. Everybody's in the same soup. Now we need to get together and get out of that soup. They're talking about here, finally, not just calories consumed in foods, but we better be careful about what we drink. And they talk about how much time we're spending in activity and how that helps us manage our weight. They're also coming out, they've never done this. Ever feel bombarded by health claims on the new product, the new juice, the new superfood, the new thing? Well, they're coming right out and saying there's no evidence, none whatsoever, for an optimal proportion of macronutrients for weight loss. So in other words, that super high protein diet, if you just eat less carbs, you'll be thinner. There's no evidence to support that, and they're coming right out and saying it. That's not the key behind weight loss and managing weight. Yay, glad somebody said that besides me. Now, I love this. You'll notice in your handouts, I'm sorry, they're not very clear because these don't copy well, but something that I think is very interesting is they're giving us some new information here that can help us as we work with individuals and as we do our own shopping and prepare our own food. Top sources of calories in folks 2 years old and older. Grain-based products. See how this can go bad? When you look at the base of the pyramid, grain-based products are supposed to be at the bulk of what we eat, right? But if you choose ones that are calorie dense versus nutrient dense, you're going to go over to the dark side, right? Yeast breads. Who would have thought that? I'm a registered dietitian. I would not have assumed that yeast breads was a primary source of too many calories or too many calories in the diet. But it's what they're telling us. Chicken and chicken mixed dishes. Hey, right, because they tell us to eat right. Chicken is lower fat, right? Lean, right? Inexpensive and versatile. Who doesn't love chicken? Until you start doing that thing to it that takes a perfect thing and takes it to the top of the pyramid. Now we've fried it, we've stripped it, we've pattied it, we've stir-fried it, casseroled it, sandwiched it, and we've even othered it until the point that it's no longer nutrient dense, it's become calorie dense. Look at number 4. Beverages. Soda and sport drinks. Just because they put that great big buff guy on the front of it does not mean that you're going to look like him when you're done, right? Calories in, even if they come from soda or sports drinks, count. And number 5, pizza. I wasn't surprised for pizza. That's familiar. Was anybody surprised by any of these other ones? Chicken. I was surprised by chicken too. Top sources of calories by age group. This is something we've never really addressed with the dietary guidelines before. They're saying it. The A word. Alcohol. It is a major source of calories. And are these nutrient-dense calories? What can my body do with a martini? Can't do much with it. It can give me some energy and turn it to triglyceride, but it can't do much for me other than that. Sodas, pizza in adolescence, and fluid milk, top source of calories for young children. Now, is everybody saying, oh, good, I'm so glad young children are drinking fluid milk? I am. Until it gets to all day long. 30 ounces, 40 ounces, 50 ounces, 60 ounces. I've seen children under school age drinking the better part of a half gallon of milk a day. It's a tremendous amount of calories, tremendous amount of protein and calcium that's very hard on the body. Okay. Principles for maintaining or promoting calorie balance. They're making these very simple statements. I love this. Manage and monitor your food intake, and they're actually giving us tools in which to track our intake now. Because you know what? Do you think we have a tendency to underreport or overreport? Under. You know, that Twinkie I ate, I just sort of forgot about that, and every time I walked by and got a piece of candy, I sort of forgot that, and oh yeah, I did have a refill on that soda at the movies, and those things just sort of go by the wayside because they're not consumed in a meal, right? They're actually offering us tools this time to monitor intake. They're telling us to reduce portion sizes, which can very simply be done by reducing a plate size, right? Or a cup size or a bowl size. They're also telling us when you eat out, pay attention. The wolf in sheep's clothing is on many menus that we go to. And limit screen time. This is not just for kids. You know, I can go home after a hard day at work and play 2 hours of video games. It's a great way to relax. But uh-oh. At the end of each chapter, it has key recommendations, very simply stated, that sum up the previous chapter. How handy is that? Now, in chapter 3, it talks about foods and foods to reduce. We all knew sodium was coming, right? And we've been trying to reduce fat for some time. Sugar we know about. They do finally say alcohol, but again, the refined grains. Need to pay more attention to the quality of the grain product. Now, okay, here you go. New sodium recommendations. 2,300 milligrams per day, that's been the pretty much standard, right? On the footnote of every label you're going to read, it's going to compare that label, percentage of sodium in that label, to this 2,300 milligrams per day. However, if you just happen to be 51 or older, a lot of us boomers, that's a whole bunch of us. If you happen to be African American, that's a whole bunch of our folks, right? If you happen to already have high blood pressure, diabetes, or chronic kidney disease, it cuts it back to what? 1,500 milligrams. Ouch. That is the equivalent of 1 can of soup. We really have to become more sodium aware. And they go as far as to say right here, immediate, deliberate action must be taken. I don't think I've ever heard these two words used in the dietary guidelines. So, what I take from that is, if I'm working with someone who is in this age group, this needs to be a focal point. That if I do this, I can make a big difference in my own personal health and in those that I serve. Thought this was interesting in these new guidelines. They have these nice pictorials, and if you'll look here, this gives you the sources of sodium. Okay, now I would have thought about yeast breads being 7.3 because I know to leaven it, to get it to rise, you know, you're going to have things like that. But here we're back with chicken. We're back to chicken again. Chicken is a high source of calories. It's also a high source of sodium. Uh-oh, here we show up with pizza again. Pizza's a high source of calories. It's also a high source of sodium. My goodness, I bet if you could reduce some of this in your diet or make it more healthfully, you'd get a big bang for your buck, don't you? Advice, they list advice here, but they come right out here and say, eat fewer processed foods. A processed food is anything that's pre-made in a box, in a can, in the frozen section, and when you eat out. Do not have illusions that at the restaurants you're eating at, the food is home prepared there. Many of those foods come in pre-made, frozen, sauces are canned, soups are canned. Do not assume that the person making your food in a restaurant is actually preparing it. You'll have to ask, is this prepared on site? Because if you don't, it won't be. They're telling you eat more foods prepared at home. And they say, ask that salt not be added to your food in restaurants. Ask for lower sodium options, but I go as far as to say ask, did they fix it here? Okay? So, they're talking about more items to reduce. Fats. 10% of calories from fat, but at less than 7%, you actually reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease even greater. In the appendices of this, I'm going to go through also very quickly a few of them. They actually give you guidelines for the DASH diet. The only diet known to reduce and reverse cardiovascular disease. You can actually go backward with the DASH diet. They want trans fats as low as possible. Notice they didn't say that they gave you, they want you to have none of it. And cholesterol, less than 300 a day. Egg yolks, up to 1 a day. It doesn't say anything about egg whites, does it? Because egg whites are all protein. There's not any fat or cholesterol in the egg white. They give you this handy little thing that I thought was great. It shows the composition of fats and oils. And so what you're looking for on here is things that have more of this medium green and yellow than they do the dark green. So you can see here, coconut oil, wow, is worse than butter. So the ones that have the higher proportion of these over here, are better than these over here. But there's a lot of nice graphics in the dietary guidelines that you can use. Here we go again. Now, sources of fat calories. Very interesting here. Look, pizza hits here again too as one of the big ones. Look, chicken and chicken mixed dishes hit again. But we have a new biggie, regular cheese. Regular cheese. So it looks to me like if you can make a change in the type of cheese you ate, you might make a difference in saturated fat in your life. Foods and food components to reduce. This is a new term here, right here. They use this little abbreviation. Solid fats and added sugars. They want us to reduce those. Sources of solid fats. Grain-based desserts, pizza, regular cheese. Are we getting a pattern here? If you want to make improvements, if these are things that you regularly eat, that could be a place to focus on to get a lot of return. Sources of added sugar. Uh-oh. Look here. We're drinking our sugar. We're drinking our added sugar. We're not even getting to chew. Okay? It's a lot of calories and we're not even getting to chew it. The next one is grain-based desserts. Refined sugars, they're coming right out and saying that this refined grains, cut back on it. Look. Cut back on enriched refined grains because they're telling us even though it's added back, it's still been refined. Enriching it doesn't undo the being refined. You can't make a whole grain after you refine it. There's nothing you can add back to make it what it was. Alcohol. And look, they have actually added specific guidance now for breastfeeding women. What they found is that women were not breastfeeding because they couldn't have an occasional drink. Now they're telling us in moderation, an occasional drink might be okay for the breastfeeding woman. No need to stop breastfeeding just because you want to go out tonight and have one drink. Key recommendations. They've got key recommendations for alcohol, but I want you to understand this. This definition for alcohol. What is alcohol? Everybody says, oh, I want a glass of wine. It's politically okay to talk about alcohol in terms of wine. I don't really believe all these people drink wine. I sort of think that these people are drinking beer and liquor, and other things too, but they say wine because it's acceptable. Let's have a glass of wine with dinner, which really loosely translates to martini. But it sounds pretty, doesn't it? I'm going to have a glass of wine. Sounds so refined. It's equal. One is no better than the other. It's about how much percentage of alcohol. So one drink is a 12-ounce beer, 5 ounces of wine, 1.5 fluid ounces, so about a shot and a half of 80 proof alcohol. One drink should have about 0.6 fluid ounces of alcohol. Any of these are equal. And they're finally coming out and saying that. They're talking about what is a high-risk drinker. What is binge drinking? They're coming right out and saying this is the stuff we have to watch. Foods to increase. Now, nobody is probably surprised at this stuff up here, vegetables, fruits, grains, milk. But they're coming right out here and saying seafood, meaning anything with fins, not necessarily food from the sea. So it could be a trout, it could be a catfish, it could be another fish, replacing some fish for meat or poultry. And they've added potassium as a nutrient of public health concern. We're going to go over potassium again in a minute. I find this fascinating. Keep potassium in the back of your mind, okay? They've got this cool little gizmo that you can use with clients or help yourself with that talks about how can you get half your grains as whole grains, because, you know, people have struggled with that. How can I do that? Well, half of everything you eat could be 100% whole grain. You could do some whole grain, some partial grain, and some refined grain, because maybe I want grilled cheese on white bread. All right? There's room in my diet for some of that. Every bite I put in my mouth doesn't have to be perfect. Or maybe I have found something that's part whole grain and part refined grain, and I really like it, and I can commit to it. You can eat all of it like that. So I like that graphic. That's really nice. And then again, they give you the foods and nutrients to increase. And then here is specific recommendations for women who are breastfeeding, including iron supplements, including watching mercury content here, eating the seafood, but of course watching the mercury. And then individuals 50 and over, watch for B12. Eat more of that. Healthy eating patterns. This is all new. And when they're talking about, this is regular meals, regular snacks, and actually even talking about the DASH eating plan. They give you this little graphic to help you understand where we're at in the whole scheme of things. This is the stuff we want to eat more of. This is the stuff we want to eat less of. This is where we need to be. As you can see, the stuff we need to eat more of, we're nowhere near goal, are we? The stuff we need to eat less of, we're overachievers in that area. Okay? I think that's a great graphic of where we stand as a group. Now, going back to food patterns, I love this. First of all, they've acknowledged that we have lacto-ovo and vegans in our midst, that a good portion of the population does not eat all forms of protein, either for personal or religious reasons. Yay! We now have a food pattern in the appendices that addresses lacto-ovo and veganism. We have also renamed 2 areas on the pyramid. So there should be a new pyramid coming out along with the dietary guidelines in the end of April. Meat and beans became protein foods, right? Milk became dairy products and also includes fortified soy milk. Because what we're really doing with this right here is calcium, right? That's what we're really trying to get people to have. They've also increased the amount of milk for 4 to 8-year-olds by 1/2 cup a day to meet basics. And with the vegetable, they've actually included red and orange vegetables down here, not just orange. Before it was just orange for the vitamin A, but does anybody know what's in red vegetables? There's phytochemicals that are in red vegetables that help fight heart disease. And number 6, they're actually giving us things that we can use to help each other, to help our clients, and to help ourselves make better choices. Okay? And they're talking about this can't just be a me thing. It has to be my family, my community, my business, government. It's everybody's responsibility. You know, every major public health initiative that's gone through in America has been due to policy change at bigger levels, right? We would probably still have polio if we hadn't said, we've got a vaccine and you have to take it. So some of this has got to be not just my own personal, but we need to work together to create policy to embrace some of these things. Now, this is my favorite part, is the appendices. And this is where I'm going to spend the bulk of our time. I ran through the other stuff really quick because you can get that. You can either download the document. When you download the document, there's a ton of information there. Likewise, this PowerPoint will be, the original PowerPoint will be on our website, and it has speaker's notes with it so that you can read that too. So there's a ton of information there. But this is the stuff I really want you to see because you can use it so easily. In these appendices, they're actually giving us strategies for applying the guidelines. Actually talks about food safety, the food label, nutrition goals for age and gender groups, these new food patterns, looking at omega-3, EPA and DHA and mercury in seafood, the food sources of nutrients of concern, the B12, the calcium, the potassium, and a glossary. Likewise, here's your resources again. You can go back online or you can go to our website, but it's dietaryguidelines.gov. Okay, here are some of my personal favorites. This is consumer behaviors. And right here, this is the topic, calorie intake. Within this, they're telling you, plan ahead. We knew that, right? If you don't plan ahead, you're left captive to whatever comes your way, which could be a convenience store. Track your food and calorie intake. Oh, and here, when they tell you the behavior that you're targeting, they're telling you the strategies to do it with, which is really, really nice. They're telling you to track food and calorie intake. They're giving you many strategies here to do it. Limit calorie from solid fats and added sugars, reducing portions, cook more meals at home, but they're actually telling you, here's the topic, here's the behavior, here's the strategy. Healthy choices when eating out, limiting screen time. They come right out and say this. I like this. They finally did it. Avoid inactivity. Avoid inactivity. Any movement is better than no movement, right? It takes, you're doing more for your body by sweeping the kitchen than you are by sitting in the living room wishing the kitchen was getting swept. I speak from personal experience. Okay? They talk about slowly build up the amount of exercise. So for the first time, they're really saying work with people where they're at. Exercise is hard for most of us. We have gone from being a physical workforce to being an intellectual workforce. For the first 15 years of my career, I worked in manufacturing. I was on my feet all day long, carrying heavy things. Let me tell you what a surprise it was to be in college. Really different life. Here it talks about eating recommended amounts of vegetables and spending the time to look and add green vegetables, red, orange, and beans and peas into your diet. And here in the milk and dairy products, they're telling you, you can count soy beverages. If you're lactose intolerant, there's no reason why you shouldn't get your calcium this way. If you prefer not to drink an animal-based product like milk, hey, we have this great product now. Well worth adding to your diet. In protein foods, they talk about adding the amount of seafood in place of meat and poultry, and gives you some strategies for preparing those things. I like that. And in oils instead of solid fats, strategies. Cut back on solid fats. They come right out and say that. And keep trans fats as low as possible. Now everybody realizes that the label can say 0 trans fat. But if you look in the ingredient list and it says partially hydrogenated oil, there's still trans fat in that product. It's just at less than 0.5 grams, so they don't have to list it. And you say, oh, it's not even a gram, so what? Well, if you ate 6 of those things today, it adds up. So the key to finding trans fat, especially if you're at high risk for heart disease, is looking for the words hydrogenated. If hydrogenated is there, trans fat is there too. Added sugar. Added sugar is not the sugar that's in fruit. It's the sugar that's been put into a product. I was just looking at a package of dried mango today. Dried mango. What do you think's in the package? Mango. Oh, you're so silly. Gloria thinks that if she were to buy a package of dried mango, she'd just get mango that's been dried. But lo and behold, there was mango juice, there was mango flavoring, and there was also sugar. My goodness, that must not have been very tasty mango before they dried it. So you have to look. There was added sugar there, as is evidenced by what's in the ingredient list. Sodium. Notice, they've never said this before, as a strategy, not only reducing sodium, but increase potassium. The two can work hand in hand. You can serve two masters with your heart. If you reduce your sodium and increase your potassium, you are really reducing the risk for cardiovascular disease. They've got the alcohol, the food safety here. And here we go. I love this. Risky eating behaviors. That's never been put like that before. And when they're talking about risky eating behaviors, they're talking about perhaps eating raw foods, foods not cooked to the proper temperature. They're also talking about perhaps raw milk, things that could not be processed, and they came right out and say, avoid risky eating behaviors. You could take it off the table. I like this too. So you look on the back of your package and it says mango, and then it says mango juice, and then it says evaporated cane juice, and then it says sugar. They can say sugar multiple times in different ways, and that way it reduces its place on the label, because things are put on the label in the order, on the ingredient list on the label, in order of quantity. If I break it up, I can disperse it throughout the label. But if I had to list all that sweetener in one, it could be the number one thing on the label. And nobody really, when they pick up mango, meant to buy sugar, right? So that's one way that food labeling can trick us. And here they are giving us some things that can be listed as sugar that you may not realize are sugar. And one of those is actually added lactose. High fructose corn syrup, we all know about that one. Corn syrup solids, a lot of people don't know what that is. So nectar, a lot of people don't know that that's sugar. So they give us these examples, and they give us the examples of what are whole grains. What is a whole grain? It could be brown rice, a lot of people know that. Quinoa, a lot of people don't know that popcorn is a whole grain. Some people don't know that rolled oats is a whole grain. Whole grain corn. So they actually tell you, this is what you're looking for on the ingredient list. Now, I love this. They've done a really nice job with these this year. It's a lot, but it's really good a lot this time. Here, I'm sorry, I know this is hard to see, but what you've got here is your nutrients listed here and the source of why they decided, who is the source of why we set this goal. And then it's got age groups, male and female age groups here, and then the amount that's required for each of these nutrients. Now let's go back to potassium here. So they've got, protein, fat, carb, fiber, magnesium, zinc, all of these vitamins down here, but I just want to point potassium. 4,700 milligrams is what's required today. Is everybody thinking that? Remember, 4,700, we're going to go forward here. Here, on the second page of this appendix, they give you the footnotes for Where does it come from? How do you measure it? Why do we choose it? Which is really nice. Then they've got one for estimated calorie needs per day by age, gender, and physical activity. And then they come down here and they define what physical activity is for you. Because a lot of people think they're active if they just get up and walk to the car. That's not active, that's sedentary. So it defines what activity is. I like that. And here they talk about these are food patterns, and they tell you, you've seen this before with the old pyramid, we had this, but they actually come out and they say the red and orange vegetables up here, they added seafood, they added nuts and seeds, never had that before, and then they add a maximum of solid fats and added sugars, which is really nice. Tells you what all of these are by each of these different levels, calorie levels. So as a woman my age, I can generally eat between 1,600 and 1,800 calories a day and maintain my weight. All my goals are right in here. Very clear cut, very nice. Okay, then they come over here and they give you the notes. They tell you what is a fruit, what is a vegetable, what is a grain. How do you know if it's a whole grain? Dairy. They tell you everything that they're referencing on the other one. And here's your lacto-ovo vegetarian food pattern. So that's really nice. And they're listing here for your protein, eggs, meats and beans and peas and soy products, nuts and seeds. How easy is that? You don't have to convert anything now again if you are not eating meat. There's vegan. Calls it out because now you're not using cheese, right? So let's see what they do for dairy. For dairy, they go here and they're going to give you, down here is calcium fortified beverages, which might be soy or it could be orange juice. There's the DASH eating plan. If you know somebody that's trying to avoid a heart attack, who has had a previous event, who wants to reverse damage, this is it right here. And you'll notice with this one, it actually gives you the serving sizes on the side here. Oh, by the way, DASH meets the needs for children as well, 4 years old and older. Because some children are born with congenital heart problems and they have to be very, very careful. So it lets us work with that population now too. Okay. I think this is so interesting. We're talking about the women, pregnancy, breastfeeding, mercury, right? Okay, I'm going to flip forward here. Oops. Now right here they're telling us you should only have 39 milligrams of mercury per week if you are pregnant or breastfeeding. Everybody remember 39, right? We go back here and it tells us, here's your fish, here's the EPA and DHA in them, and here's the mercury in them. Down here it says these are the things that you should not consume if you are a woman who's pregnant or breastfeeding. Shark, tilefish, swordfish, and king mackerel. They have very high levels of mercury here, 151, 219, 147, okay? But in my mind, if they just told me 39, it looks like bluefin tuna and albacore should be avoided. It looks like white albacore tuna should be avoided. It looks like yellowfin and skipjack tuna should be avoided. And it looks like lobsters should also be avoided. Unless you just had a bite. But you can't have a full serving of any of these and meet that 39 milligrams. Okay? Well, it's actually micrograms. That 39 micrograms. So you want to avoid that. Likewise, they're telling you here, look at this. Look at this Atlantic salmon. Look how much omega-3 you get in this, and look how little mercury. Wow! That's a big difference, isn't it? And look down here, this pink salmon and sockeye, you get a whole lot of that for a very little bit of mercury too. Hey, and who would have thought this? Oysters. Likewise. So this really opens our eyes up to different ways that we can get omega-3 and still be careful with ourselves as far as mercury goes. Okay, going back to potassium, remember that? 4,700. Wow. The first place that I thought was interesting is they're telling us here. Here's the standard portion size for foods rich in calcium. Here's the calories and how much potassium you get in each one of them. The highest potassium, 664, 654. This is like 556, 549, 405. Okay? We're trying to get 4,700, right? You want to be really careful that you're getting a good trade of calories, because for this 664 here, I'm only having to expend 54 calories to get it. Up here, this is 707 and 182 calories. You could go way outside your calorie needs just to try to meet your potassium needs, don't you think? If you weren't paying attention to the calories that you have to trade to get your potassium. Look at this though. Look at tomato juice or tomato sauce. 29 calories, 406 milligrams of potassium. That sounds great, doesn't it? What did they leave off this chart? Sodium, GOP. I wonder how much sodium I have to trade for that. Right? Potassium levels are not listed on the food label. You can't easily compare potassium to sodium in the grocery store. Whether that's going to come out on the new food label that they're talking about redoing, I don't know. But you need to think about it. If potassium is now a public health concern, this is a really important thing to understand, is how many calories do I have to spend to get enough potassium, and am I paying attention to the sodium at the same time?
What does potassium do for your body?
Potassium is a regulator. It's a mineral, and it can help counter the effects of sodium. Bananas, orange juice, a lot of different sources of potassium. Heart regulation. Potassium does many things. But you know what? As you can see, our typical diet is not really high in potassium. And these are the best sources that we have. Now, here we go. Food sources ranked by calories and fiber. Another thing that we're going to tell you, this is great. You know, you want more fiber. Where are you going to get it and how many calories are you going to expend to get it? Artichokes, raspberries, blackberries, pumpkin, sauerkraut, squash, a great exchange, calories for fiber. But with that sauerkraut, you know that's going to be full of sodium. So you have to think about that. Winter squash could also be full of sodium if you bought it pre-cooked and it had sodium added. But when you're looking at some of these calories, it's very high in proportion to what you're getting. Okay? So you have to weigh the two against each other. For this one, almonds, 163 calories for 3.5 milligrams of fiber. Yeah, that's great. There's a lot of good stuff in almonds, but can I eat that 4 times a day to try to hack up my calcium? Probably not. This one does the same thing, more with the calcium, and I think you'll find this interesting because what's the name of the new food group? It's no longer the milk group, it's the dairy group, and its object is to get us to have more calcium, correct? The top 2 sources of calcium on here are not dairy. I found that interesting. It's fortified cereal and orange juice. Yep. Fortified cereal, because yes, a cereal like a name brand I can't say on air, but it's fortified, so it's not in its natural state. It is in fact fortified. Okay. Here we go. Selected food sources with vitamin D. Vitamin D has become a real issue too, and they're telling you here, this is great, but I found this to be very confusing. All of a sudden, they're starting to measure vitamin D in micrograms. And almost any supplement you get or any label you're going to read is going to talk about it in international units. But they do give you here, in this little tiny type, how to convert micrograms to international units. While they just didn't put it up here, they had room on the table. Look at all this white space. So if vitamin D is something that you're working on, you might want to just go through and convert it to international units for yourself. They also give us a great glossary of terms, including added sugars, calorie balance, serum cholesterol. These are ones that I think everybody should know. What a cup equivalent is, dietary reference intakes. These are great clarifiers of what some of the terminology in the dietary guidelines means. The fats, all the omega-3, omega-6, what's the difference? The difference between fortification and enrichment, because they're two different things. Macronutrient, nutrient dense is listed. Seafood, and if you see here for seafood, it's things that live in fresh water or in salt water. It's not just the sea. And sugar-sweetened beverages, talks about what those are. So this is a very comprehensive dietary guideline, very comprehensive. It's 112 pages. Again, it'll be released for consumer hardback. You could order printed copies at the end of April. I will put this presentation up that also has speaker notes. But the one thing I would really encourage you to do is if you're somebody that gets bogged down in the first 100 pages, go straight to the appendices. Those are really, really useful, very well laid out. And if there's something in the appendix that you don't understand, you'll know right, it'll tell you what chapter it came from, that you can go back and get more information. But so the biggies here are, what do they say about the sodium? Immediate call to reduce sodium. That's probably the single biggest thing, I think. And calling out refined grains, solid fats, added sugars. Paying attention to that a calorie is not a calorie. This is the first time I think that they've really come out and said it's not just about not eating too many calories. It's about the quality of the calorie that you're eating. So those to me are the big things. And as always, this material was brought to you in part by the United States Department of Agriculture SNAP Ed program. We are an equal opportunity employer. We do not discriminate against anyone, nor do we hang out with those that do. MSUE programming is available to everyone in our community. We desire to serve our entire community, and we always appreciate when you show up and help us spread the word about healthy nutrition practices. Can I answer anybody's questions?
Do you know what the cost is going to be on the hardbound?
They should be free. Hardbound, you'll have a limited number of copies that you'll be able to order, but the hardbound copies should be free. They've always been free in the past.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? You might want to take a look at that dietaryguidelines.gov website. There's a whole lot of cool stuff there that you can click on if you're a clicker. I like to click. So if you enjoy clicking, it's a good website. Okay. Thanks a lot, folks. Go and eat less sodium.